Hi, this is Travis Cody. Welcome to the Victory Podcast. I am excited for our guest today, Curtis Robinson. Curtis, thank you for being here with us.
Hey, Travis, it's great to be here, my friend. I'm excited to work on your project with you a little bit and get to know you.
Likewise, we were just having a good conversation about your samurai behind you there. I'm just curious, what is it about samurai that catches your attention?
Well, I've been training in martial arts since I was about 13. I'm 54 this month, so a
All
little bit
right.
more than 40 years. It's been a while, but always been fascinated with the Asian martial arts particular. Of course, I teach kickboxing and jiu-jitsu as my retirement gig. I run an FFL gun shop as well. So I've kind of surrounded myself with some pretty cool paintings that I just like. And this is my private office. So out there, in the training area, it looks a little different. But this is kind of my little. I guess it's just my little comfort place here.
I like that your retirement is beating up people and shooting stuff. That's a pretty good retirement.
Well, I tell you, Travis, the great thing about martial arts is that uh, you get to hit people or kick people or grab people and throw people or choke and arm lock people, but you have to do it with a certain amount of respect and love. You're giving your body, you're donating your body to another human being to train with. So while I do that, I hit people and I hit them often, even the 21, 25-year-old crowd who want to hit hard, or I throw them or I choke them, whatever else. We are such good friends. There's, I hate to say intimate, that might not be the best word, but there's an intimacy
Sure.
to violence. And when you look at it in a self-defense context, it's actually instructional. It's super important.
Yeah, I get it. And so you were in the military for 20 years, correct?
20 years active duty. Yes, sir.
Yeah. What branch?
United States Army.
And what was your job?
Well, I joined in 1989. I was a paratrooper at Fort Bragg. I was in the engineer corps, so we blew stuff up. And we also built helipads and we built bridges and those sorts of things. And then I moved on, decided that I was frustrated by leadership and decided to, once I made sergeant, once I make sergeant, things will change. And of course, things didn't change. So I decided to go to OCS and became an officer. I said, once I become a lieutenant, things will change. Then I realized that at every level, there are people that are both great and amazing leaders, but there's also people that are dumber and uglier than I was. So I wanted to continually move up and I wanted to be more and more in charge. And then after 20 years, retirement came around and I had done most of the things that I wanted to do. It was pretty great, really a great life. It's a hard life, but it's a great life.
Sure. So I'm served overseas.
Yeah, absolutely. So got two tours of combat, one in Desert Storm. We landed in Dhahran, move up through Dammam, up Tapline Road into Iraq and back around through Kuwait. Our unit was kind of the tip of the spear. The only people in front of us were Special Forces and the French Foreign Legion. So that was a pretty exciting, but short kind of combat event. And then of course in 07 and 08, I was in Afghanistan, where I was training the militia. So basically we went out, I had a 13-man team and we trained people how to fight. And we went on a number of great missions with those local people.
Wow. So the whole point of the Victory Podcast is to talk about, primarily it's about leadership and how do you lead teams of people, right? So I've had several conversations with people who are leading businesses, and there's a big challenge in the business world of just getting to your first 10 employees, which 95% of businesses never really get to. But then you hit 10 employees and going from 10 to 20, the culture changes, 20 to 50, 50 to 100, right? So, and that's business. We don't have the stress of combat on top of that. So I would love to have a conversation with you about, obviously you worked up the ranks, you became a sergeant, then a lieutenant. And what was the rank that you ended up retiring at?
So I ended my career at Lieutenant Colonel, but I never wore the rank, so to speak. It's at the end of your tour, I was on the list for Lieutenant Colonel. They presented it to me, kind of an honorarium. But I tell everybody that I was the toughest major in the military, and I told my wife, she's wants to be called Mimi, which I think is a sweet name for a grandmother. She's like, well, what do you think you might like to be called when we have grandkids? And I said, it's just the major. The kids can call me the major. That's all.
Oh, that's awesome. So
Yep.
let's talk about that then. So, the hierarchy of leadership. So when you became a sergeant, how did that differ from being, in the rank and file, and what were the responsibilities that got thrust on you that you may have been aware of and the ones that showed up that you weren't aware of?
Yeah, the number one thing is always accountability of personnel and equipment in the military. I mean, I also have run 3 clinical counseling practices, and I sold
Wow.
those at 4 times their value when I was done. And I can tell you that it's the same for me. It was the same in the military as it was in civilian world, which is you take care of the people, they'll take care of you. That is essential. So responsibility and accountability of personnel and equipment is job one. You have to take care of the men.
Wow, that's fantastic. So when you got into civilian life and you started your clinics, what were the skills that you learned in the military that translated over? Obviously, you've just shared the 4 of them, but was there things specifically? I guess what was the same and what had to be finessed?
Well, I will tell you that a person that joins the military, that signs a dotted line, and ultimately commits their life to the military, you kind of own them. You can you can treat them differently than you would a civilian. Civilian, you don't own. They'll just leave.
Right.
You say something that they don't like, they'll just never come back. And it was I was very eye-opening to me that I had to, when you say finesse, I had to learn to be more reasonable, more temperate, more patient, and then ultimately, in cases where I could feel that I really needed to apply pressure, I oftentimes turned to my wife, who was my CFO, and I'd have her work with those people because she was very soft-spoken and very gentle, and she could get the point across in a way that wasn't militant. So that was the big difference. If you're asking about the difference, but again, there's a lot more in common than probably we would really expect.
Well, I think leadership is leadership, right? And I think to some extent, that's one of the challenges with the corporate world, is that people aren't being effectively trained as leaders. A lot of times they're coming out with, it's more about the degree, and the big joke that a lot of my clients have that run big corporations is the middle managers are the ones that sort of got like promoted to the level of their incompetency, right? They weren't really great workers, they weren't really whatever, and so you end up with, like you said, somebody that's uglier and not as smart as you now in charge. So I'm just curious, what was it that led you to creating the clinics when you came out of the military? Was there a vision
Yes.
behind that?
Yeah, so from 07 to 08, I was in Afghanistan, and I took 110 soldiers with me. They trained well, they were ready. We did 3 months of train up, and we got into country. We were there 12 months, boots on the ground, and they performed extremely well. Then we left. We had a 3-month demobilization. So 18 months we were gone. And when I got back, a lot of them didn't reintegrate well. So again, good before, good during, even good at the end. But then once they went back to being in garrison, more of a well, it was a less, there wasn't, there weren't people shooting at you every day. It was just different. And a lot of these folks ended up in debt, and they ended up drinking drugs. They ended up having other family problems like you wouldn't believe. And I realized that the inability for them to reintegrate, they were stuck in the in the military mindset of combat. They didn't really adapt back. So I was trying to get these people some help. Went through the military chain of command, and I tried to get them helped out. Some of them left the military, and I tried to get them in with the VA. It just wasn't enough. It was, the military has a system, and if the system doesn't work for you, you fall through the cracks. And it's not that it's a bad system, but it's a system for million-man army. It's not a system for the one.
Yeah.
So when I retired several years later, again, this was 08 and 09, by 2014, when I retired, I had a bachelor's degree in psychology, I had a master's degree in clinical counseling. Even though that wasn't what I did in the military, I wanted to use that. I opened up a business, and within about 30 days of my retirement being in effect, we were up and running, and I wanted to help the local veterans particularly, but we helped everyone with anxiety, depression, grief, trauma, marriage and family problems. We helped the courts in some ways with people who were mandated to go to get therapy for anger management, for example. And I just really wanted to help people, which is a very different thing than I was doing in Afghanistan. It was very different from what I had done for 20 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what a jump. It's interesting to me that, with all the data and all the statistics, the fact that, the United States has been through a few wars now. They know the effect of putting somebody in high stress situations for a lengthy amount of time and then bringing them home. It's just interesting to me at this point in time, the military still doesn't have sort of a deprocessing, like how to, like, boot camp. Why doesn't the military have a boot camp for when you've come out of combat to get back into civilian life, right? Because when I'm a civilian, I join. You guys do a good job over 12 weeks of getting me in shape. It's just interesting that they don't have that thing of like. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, but I'm now that we're talking about it, I'm like, it's just fascinating with especially the budget that our Defense Department has, that they haven't figured that part out yet. It's kind of like, thanks for serving, good luck. So
yeah, and to some degree, I think that there's always more that we can do. The demobilization is 3 months. So we mobilized out of Camp Shelby, Mississippi. We came back to Camp Shelby, Mississippi for 3 months. We're there trying to, we're talking to the chaplain. We're talking with mental health providers. We're talking with our commanders. We're talking about what's going to happen when we get back. Things are going to be different. The wife has been running the show for a year or 18 months, and you're going to come in and try to take over that. And it's not going to go well. I mean, we had these briefings, and we've had the experts. We had, social workers and some psychologists and stuff. And of course, again, the chaplains corps heads a lot of that up, even though that it's not a religious demobilization, but they're the ones that are kind of in charge of the softer side, I guess, of demobilization. And I mean, for 3 months, we went through that and trying to get our lives back together and get prepared and get our, get the changes if we were injured or had other problems, that those were listed in our medical records. I mean, all these things, the military does, but in the end, this is the problem with corporate America, by the way. We'll talk about that again, I hope.
Yeah.
The problem was when you're feeding the million-man army, there's a lot of onesie twosies that don't get fed. And when I say fed, it could be spiritually fed. It could be emotionally fed. It could be physically, something's going wrong with them and they weren't taken care of medically. So yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. It's a hard thing.
Well, I would assume the military is the same as the corporate world, right? If you're showing up and doing your job, the assumption is you're okay.
That's right.
And the reality is, like in the corporate world, like you said, anxiety and depression, right? Somebody can be major depressed and you're showing up and they're doing their job, but once they're out of work, right, their life is not great. But because they're showing up to work every day, everybody thinks everything's good. So, so you took your clinic from 1 clinic to 4 clinics, and then and was that intentional, or that just sort of happened because of the need?
Yeah, so actually, we had 3 clinics. I apologize if I
probably heard you wrong.
Yeah, we may have misunderstood each other. That's okay. So yeah, I started with 1 clinic in Conway, Arkansas, and as it grew, I wanted to reach out and kind of it's called the ink blot strategy in the military, which is to say you drop an ink blot on a map and it slowly spreads, but you need to drop another ink block and that spreads until it connects. It's a presence. Our presence needs to be there. So back in 2014, remember, this is before COVID. It's hard to believe it was so long ago, right? People actually came to therapy in person. And in order for people to come to my clinic, I had to have a clinic in their area, and I could get people to travel about 15 miles. That's about it. So again, we started with Conway. We branched out to Maumelle, which is a smaller town, but nice, very, very upscale. And then we moved to North Little Rock. And then we were looking, by the time I sold, we were looking at Little Rock. So we had really spread nicely over Central Arkansas because we wanted to have a presence, and we wanted to be able to get our services out to people in a very broad range.
Got it. So what were some of the strategies you used when you were a major to nurture the leadership skills of the guys underneath you, the captains? Well, we'd have captains, lieutenants, sergeants.
Sure, sure. Well, I'll tell you the first thing, Travis, is whatever you do, you need to know the people. When I say know them, you can't say, all right, I got the file for Sergeant Jones or for Lieutenant, Smith, and this is who they are. That's not who they are. That's just what's on paper. What you have to do is you got to get to know these people in a way that you can empower them to do what they are best at. So, for example, I'd be willing to bet you that if I paid you enough money, you could probably fix a toilet. You could probably, install a light, or a ceiling fan. You could probably do it. But if it's not what you love and it's not what you're good at, it'll be a struggle and production will be down, or job satisfaction will be down. So the bottom line is that, again, universally, what should we do? We should meet these people that we're hiring, or meet the people that they're adding to our team in the case of the military, and we get to know them. We really got to dig in, because they're going to try to say what they think we want to hear. What we got to do is we got to listen to really what it is that they want. And there's a very famous guy, and I know a lot of them from my research. I can't remember which one said it. Maybe you'll know. Could be Dale Carnegie. But it said, the guy said that the best way to get what you want is to help other people get what they want.
Zig Ziglar.
Zig Ziglar. Thank you so much. I couldn't remember. But anyway, it's just such a great idea that even in the military, what is it that you want out of the military? Or what is it that you want as a therapist? What do you want as a writer? What is it that you really want? And if I can help you get that and empower you to do what you're good at, we'll both be successful. Again, if I ask you to clean toilets and you're trained to be a explosive ordnance disposal kind of guy, you're going to feel like this sucks. It's not what I joined the military for example.
Yeah, I got it. So were there any particular, like maybe one or two stories of men underneath you that you really saw kind of go from, fresh faced into becoming a, really remarkable leader and treating their men the way they did, where even you as a leader looked in and was inspired by them? And if so, any of the stories you care to share?
Yeah, of course. I can tell you that there have been a number of people that, kind of think of the bell curve, right?
Sure.
So at the tail end, you got people who they aren't good in your command and you're not good for them. And then in the other tail, there's the perfect guy that's, they do what they're supposed to do and you like them and they like you, and that works out well. But in the body, in the first and second distribution, right and left of the mean, we're going to see really a lot of people that they can do it. Even if they're faking it a little bit, they can kind of do it. But I can tell you that I had a soldier, and I think this is one of my favorite stories that I tell, and this guy hated me. He was in the tail. I mean, he did not like me. I was his commander, and he was a mechanic, believe it or not. And he always came to work on time. He always did his job. He was an expert. I could rely on him, and he was a sergeant, and he took care of his men. And I would have bet a paycheck that this guy was expecting me to crush him on his efficiency report. And I didn't particularly like him, so to speak, because I knew he hated me. But I got past my own personal feelings and I rated this guy extremely well. And he came in and he thanked me. And he was like, "Sir, I just didn't think, I never thought you felt this way about me. On paper, you're saying I'm a shooting star. I'm doing great." He says, I just didn't have that feeling. And I told him, I said, "Look, Sergeant, you're here to do a job and you do it well. You don't have to like me, but I have to take care of you. And if you do a good job, I want to see you get promoted and I want to see you enjoy your time in the military, and it doesn't have to be adversarial." And he went on to have a really great career, and he took great care of soldiers. And it really was just, I had to get out of the mindset that we were adversaries. I had to put that aside. And it's very difficult because, again, don't we all have a boss? We've all had that one boss that we just couldn't stand, or that you did everything you could to please them, and they just, they just crushed you every chance they could.
Personality conflicts, right? And again, you see that in the corporate world. Unfortunately, in the corporate world, maybe you have this in the military as well, but you get into the politics system as well, right? So now there's politics mixed into it, and unfortunately, you don't have people as enlightened as saying the guy on paper is doing his job. It's fine. I don't have to necessarily like him, but so as you were building your company, what were some of the steps that you went through to identify the people that you knew would become your managers and the executives that would be running things for you? Did you have a system for that, or after 20 years in the military, was it more of kind of a gut feeling?
Well, I wish it could be something as simple as a gut feeling. There's really a methodology. It should be systematic. And if it is systematic, then you should probably be reviewing the system and make sure it's doing what you want it to do, right? So you look at kind of precision and accuracy. Does the thing do what it's supposed to do, or is it just doing something and it's running in a way that you're really not controlling it? I say that because when people would come in and they would, most people that wanted to work for me just wanted to do therapy, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
All they wanted to do was shut the door and have 45-minute to an hour session with their client, open the door, let them out, and get another person in, and that is it. They really didn't want to be micromanaged. Don't tell me how to run therapy. Don't tell me how to deal with my clients, and so on and so forth. So guess what? I didn't. I chose not to micromanage these people. There's a lot more requirements for micromanagement in the military, particularly under stress and under dangerous situations. But I tell you, if you hire the right person, and I always looked at their qualifications, everyone had to have a master's degree to come work for me if they want to be a therapist, or a PhD or a PsyD. So that was an easy one. They also had to have a license, and there's usually 2 levels of licenses. The initial license is the one right after you get your degree and you go and you get your basic license, kind of like your beginner's permit when you're driving a car.
Sure.
And usually those people are pretty good, and they're learning who they are, learning how to do therapy. But I never would hire those people. I would always hire the people that had the higher license, which takes about 4 years. So I would hire people that I considered to be experienced. I expected them to be experts. And when I expected expertise, they delivered expertise. And then the only thing I had to deal with for the most part was trying to get people to do the small things. For example, you might not know it, but in order for me as a business owner to collect money from an insurance company, let's say Blue Cross Blue Shield, there's a note that has to happen. So therapist goes in, sees the client for an hour, and then they write up some notes or type up some notes and so forth. And then they have to stick that in the electronic healthcare record system. Then that note has to be approved, basically that it's complete. And then we submit it as a reimbursable hour. And there were therapists who would get behind on their notes. And I just told them, I said, I can't pay you. And they're just like, well, why can't you pay me? Well, you're 20 or 30 notes behind. We haven't been reimbursed. You're not done with the job. The job requires you to do this. By the way, your board, your license depends on you doing this good note and in a timely fashion. You got to record like a doctor's note, right? So again, they had some difficulty doing that from time to time. Some people couldn't be on time. When I said they couldn't be on time, they'd have a 1-hour appointment and they got another guy right behind him, and they couldn't get that guy out and get the new guy in an hour's time. They just couldn't do it. So we had to sit down and have a little, what we call a come to Jesus meeting, right? We chatted a little bit. Hey, what do we got to do to help you schedule your time better so you can do these notes? Schedule your time better so that you can have a short break if you go over a little bit. So instead of having an hourly appointment, you have an hour and 15-minute appointment, so that there's a 15-minute gap in there to do that note, to close up. Those were the difficult things, because again, once you got 4 years as a therapist and you're licensed, you got that master's degree, I mean, you should be an expert.
Yeah. So was when you started, did you ever assume that you would grow big enough that you could sell it? Was that always part of the vision, or did that just sort of happen organically as you went along?
So I've never sold a business in my life prior to that. I
Sure.
didn't know what it was. I knew that people did that, but I didn't know how to find a seller. I mean, how was I going to just build this building and just sell it? And I know that some big name entrepreneurs build something and then they sell it. They build it and they sell it, and they're really good at that.
Yeah,
So I didn't know how to.
they're just their gig. That's all they do. They love to just build and sell.
Yeah, and I wasn't intending on selling, but there was a consolidation and acquisition in the field, and somebody made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. Again, it was 4 times the valuation of the business, which is excellent. Usually, 1 time valuation, you're kind of in trouble. You just want to get out of it. 2 times valuation, you're probably doing okay, but there's not a market for it. Maybe people don't really want to buy your business unless it's at a discount. 3 times valuation, you're doing a great job and somebody wants you. But 4 times the valuation, they want you bad.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. So now that you've been through the military, you built and sold something, how are you planning to enjoy your retirement?
So one of the things that I did, I'm kind of like the gentleman that you talked about earlier who claimed that he was retired at 21, right? So I'm always doing something. I tell people that I can't sit still. I don't idle well. And there are people like me all over the world. I want to spend time with family. I'm a religious man. I want to go to church and have a calling and help people in the community. I love doing those things. And I feel empowered and I feel like I'm helping people when I do those things. It's my duty, so to speak. I have a duty to my family, if you can kind of put it in those terms. But what do I do on the side, man? I got all this downtime. Man, I can play video games. I mean, how much Elden Ring or Call of Duty can you really play, So, I play a little guitar and, I try to do some other things to keep me busy, but I love building businesses. And I built a consulting practice kind of by accident. Third Bridge is a company that first approached me, and then GuidePoint also approached me, and they wanted me to spend time on a phone for an hour at $200 an hour to advise big corporate entities on how I ran my clinical counseling practices. And I thought, man, this is pretty good money. It wasn't consistent. It wasn't every day. I said, man, I should just do that. So I built a business called First Page Wellness, meaning on the first page of Google is where you find the best business.
Yeah.
If you're on the second page of Google, you're not very good. You're not doing it right.
Nobody's going to see you really.
So I wanted, my businesses are always going to be the first page, the first page of Google. So First Page Wellness is a business, and at firstpagewellness.com, you can go to my website. You can kind of see what I do, but I coach and I consult people on how to build these therapy practice. Everything from, how do you, select land or select a building, or if you're going to rent or you're going to buy, and then hiring and, the recruiting retention process and training. And then do you have the scheduling reception group in-house, or are you call centering, those kinds of things? Billing, again, are you using a call center? Or are you doing that in-house? And those are the things that I really got good at. And again, I built 3 practices and I sold these 3 practices, and we were writing ourselves, not only my wife and I both got a salary from the business, we were writing ourselves a distribution check every single month. We were doing great. And I know how to do it.
Well, that's fantastic. So that's firstpagewellness.com.
It is.
Who's your ideal client for that? Then somebody who's running a wellness or a more of a therapy-based practice?
Sure. Well, first of all, because the medical field is very diverse, I couldn't help somebody as much if they are a cardiologist and they're running a heart center.
Sure.
But I could help them in the business side exclusively, because it is the same, with reimbursements. And I understand insurance companies and billing and those kinds of things. I understand you got to have a scheduling receptionist staff. I know how to build those things. How to collect information on the first appointment. We did all of those things. But I am really niche market focused in on social workers, clinical counselors, psychologists, psych nurses, and then psychiatrists. These are the people in particular. Also, psychological examiners are really good. And here's the thing that most people think. They're like, Curtis, my first year in the business, I made $50,000 just as a therapist, just doing therapy. By the 4th year, I got my higher license. I was making 80 grand a year. That's really good money. Well, that's true. But when you leverage the resources of others, they're doing the work. and then I was paying these people that 70, 80, $100,000 a year. There has to be something left for me, right?
Sure.
That's what a business owner does. The business owner puts together the system. He empowers the people to do what they really love doing. And then ultimately, when I leverage their resources, then I get something back. And usually it takes 6 months to a year just to break even. But after a year, you should it should really climb into the $1 million practice. It should be something pretty easy.
Wow. Well, if there was a theme for your life, I can see that service has been a big part of your life. So, on behalf of everyone, thank you for your service. You served for 20 years, you served your men. I find it interesting that when you came out, you found a way to keep serving your fellow soldiers. And now, in a lot of ways, you're still doing it. Now you're broadening it out instead of just doing three. How many clinics can you help with your consulting? So, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. It's been a fantastic chat.
Travis, you've been awesome, man. I love being on your podcast, by the way. Big fan, and hopefully you'll see me liking a lot more and sharing a lot more on our social media channels now that you and I know each other.
Cool. Cheers.
Take care, brother.